Looks like I get a little extra time, so I also joined my colleague Mirko Becker in expressing my enthusiasm for Archimeet and my excitement and honor in being here. It's very impressive to have heard the discussions of the last 2 days. And there's a lot to hear and also to think about, in fact. So what I'd like to speak about is something that I have called surplus value in architectural design. And I think it's very important, regardless of what else one has heard this yesterday and today, were it in the form of some irony, perhaps sometimes a bit sarcastic. I think there's every reason to celebrate architecture, every reason to celebrate being an architect, but then in the process of remembering precisely what we do. We plan through drawings and through modelings for the future. We don't build, in fact. Nor are we directly. We contribute to areas of real estate, of culture, and so on and so forth. But architecture as a discipline, reflecting also in part the call that Odile Deck made yesterday. I'll continue and then I'll catch up with the slides. Before going into then expanding on this idea of surplus value, which is really then about what we do in the design process, I would also like to introduce you very briefly to the institution where I have the privilege of also working with Mirko, who just spoke. So this is a tiny art school in Germany, but very well known internationally, worldwide. And Städelschule has, since its very beginning, had an architecture class that then in the 1970s became internationalized. And since then it has had Peter Cook as one of the deans. And are we on? It had Peter Cook as a dean. It had Enrique Miralles, the Spanish architect who tragically died, and then Ben van Berkel took over the school in 2001 when I also joined him. We have a program which is postgraduate, meaning that our students already have an architectural education. They come to us to specialize. And we offer then a program that is research-based. And the first year is all about introducing students to very, very specific procedures of research and experiments, believing as we do that the horizon for developing architecture, for the possibility for us to push the boundary of what architecture might be today and in the future is actually great. It is tied, of course, to technology, and it would be fun to show you some of these. Push ahead. Okay, let's see. No, click. Yeah. Just have to find my mouse. There we go. So that's my title slide. This is about the architecture class. That's what the school looks like. This is from the 1970s event, late 70s, where there you see the young Koolhaas and Krier. It was the beginning of this internationalization that I spoke about. This is Ben van Berkel guiding students around at the Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart. This is Mark Wigley, former dean of Columbia University, who teaches history and theory with us, together with his wife, Beatrice Colomina. Despite the smallness of the school, we're very proud to have, I think, an outstanding annual lecture series that draws international guests speaking on a broad range of topics in architecture. This is the structure of the program, where in the second year we offer specializations. That's the first year content. This is the second year specializations. Advanced architectural design is basically conventional building design. Architecture and aesthetic practice is my leading a small group of students speculating on arts with respect to the arts. Architecture and performative design is led by Mirko that you just met, and then we had Peter Trommer of this year leading architecture and urban design. Mirko already spoke about, pardon the poor size of this one. There's two forthcoming issues in our SAC journal that we're very excited about that will address in part also some of the things that we are that I'm about to speak about. Apparitions, I hope this runs like it should be. This project I will get back to. The problem, Rem Koolhaas, reflecting on the digital in public discussion in Venice in June, basically spoke about the, how he basically was sad about seeing the digital being used in order to support the market values in architecture and basically reducing architecture to something that it should have the scope of going beyond. The digital could also partly be explained in terms of the digital being based on binary numbers, zeros and ones. So that basically means that whatever information you look at, sorry, whatever information you look at would either be coded in one, be coded in one of two discrete states, zeros or ones. Nelson Goodman, for his Languages of Art in 1968, basically looks to the analog and poses a challenge to the digital, saying that in part the analog is superior in processing information, such as in this painting by Hokusai. So this would be at the moment when a particular paint stroke, having a specific location in the painting, could belong to this region or to that. So it incorporates, in fact, ambiguity. And for Nelson, it was basically came to this, the task of settling the maximum required fineness of discrimination to be relayed in a representation or computed by a machine. Now, I believe that the very idea of surplus value would be that to call on the digital or the computational and say they can contribute something beyond forms of efficiency, something beyond forms of optimization. Those two being certainly very much at the service of the market. One way of doing that is to look at basically design spaces which are saturated, just overload these spaces with information. The other one would be to look at logical or material computation like Meko has just shown you. And the last one would be to basically question or begin to look at how we stand in relationship to this technology when we enter into control and when we basically let go of control. So big data could be like pouring graphic information into the field. These are very early works that I undertook with colleagues a long time ago that resulted, for instance, in the type of project that you see on the right, which is a football stadium in Turla, Helsinki. It was a time when we also, when I introduced for this project particle streaming. So at the very bottom, you see stills from a particle streaming sequence for a location in Norway. And then above, you see processing of that excess information in CATIA through various techniques that software program allowed for. So that had to do with filtering the information, sectioning it, and tessellating it. The last speculation was basically looking then at an algorithmic way of imitating or simulating the paths, the fiber paths in the composite structure. This is an excess amount of geometric information generated through an L system within the envelope of a building for a community hall on Cyprus, and it basically results in this critique of the ribbon window as set out by Le Corbusier. So it would just be an example of trying to bring all these things back to disciplinary specific problems whenever there's a possibility to do so. Now, control and ambiguity. In the architecture class in Städelschule, I have then been engaged with this group, Aesthetic Practice, Architecture and Aesthetic Practice, for the past, this is the second year. And basically what we try to do is engage with the arts to challenge sort of dominions of decision-making in architecture. Last year we did so through a project eventually called Garden State, cinematographic space and choreographic time. We worked with a group called Mamasa, which has been connected to the Forsyth group in Frankfurt. And it resulted in this Garden State project that was mounted as a weekend-long type of installation, environment, interactive, environment, semi-programmed sort of garden, an idealistic type of thing where plants were brought in by citizens in Frankfurt and mapped over on the space of the cultural hall. It was also repeated in Venice just recently, and the project that's also been in Buenos Aires. And the project that I showed you at the beginning, and I'll go very, very fast here, was then the master thesis project by one of my students last year, Damjan Jovanovic, and he looked at the enclosed garden, established a series of principally what I would now refer to as disciplinary specific criteria for his work. So he was basically able to look at the garden in terms of keyhole perspectives, the path, which is reminiscent of the Promenade Architecture as it exists in all from classical Greek architecture through to Le Corbusier and beyond. And he did a series of drawings, engaging with the drawing, and almost as it were in a response to Mirko's comment a moment ago, you know, that there are techniques that takes you sort of around the role of drawing. This would be more like saying, well, what role could a drawing possibly have? And Damjan then went on to write a software program or a software solution in the software program processing, and entered into a very exciting process where he would go in and engage with the results that he had generated digitally, make judgments, bring it back to his own project in terms of the specific architectural interests, but all the time asking now, what is it that the computational can actually do for us, and what is it that the computational can actually generate for me that I would not be able to do? So I don't think this gives any answers, and in fact, if I were to make a sort of naive little statement, it would precisely perhaps be that what I call excessive or surplus value is dealing with so much thing that we don't have this sort of closure that forms of rationalization and forms of efficiency could lead to in architecture. But basically that we engage with a contemporary tool in such a way that we can explore it for what it could give, what it could return to the discipline itself. I was going to see if I could accelerate that, but I'll give it a second. Basically what he has here is a tool that with which he can generate different forms of geometry, and eventually the geometry that he chooses, the one that you saw at the very beginning in this sort of sketch design for a large gallery, conglomeration of gallery spaces next to the new European Central Bank in Frankfurt, it's just one of many possible outcomes. However, what is important is, of course, like I just said, that he's able to retain and pursue these very specific architectural building design criteria or disciplinary specific interests from the very beginning. And these last few drawings would just go some way to remind you of those. And this is nowhere near a building proposal as such. Far from it. It would be what I referred to perhaps earlier, a pre-tectonic construct, something that comes long before material and structural solutions, but basically something that is concerned with architecture as a design practice, as a speculative and creative endeavor that engages with a series of forms of input and that cannot and never will be reduced to the forms of rationalization and optimization that other disciplines, including also a market, might be pushing it towards. Thank you very much.